Doing?
So say that again, RFM.
I said, good evening, everyone. How are you, Mr. Real? How are you doing?
I'm doing so good, my friend. I had you muted there, but I corrected that quick enough. Had you go through a little run through. How's life treating you back from Sunstone?
It's absolutely fantastic. Yes, just back yesterday from Sunstroke in Utah.
Yeah, and you rushed back to be part of the Mormon newscast where last night we covered the Fairview town meeting in regards to the McKinney Temple building. And
Yes.
that was pretty interesting to watch. The church seems to lack some self-awareness, don't they?
Yes, and I think that's something that's a persistent problem for the LDS Church. They needed 6 votes out of 7 city councilmen. They almost made it. They lost that by a hair, 7-0.
Yeah, they lost all 7 votes. They didn't get 1 vote, and they needed to get 6.
Yes, they could only afford to lose 1 vote. They lost them all, but it was very
Lost them all.
It was
yeah,
very
they're
close.
like Apollo Creed against Mr. T. They lost
Apollo Creed
everything.
against Mr. Oh, that was
He lost
that was
everything.
bad. That was very
Including
bad.
his life. Yeah.
Too soon, Mr. Real. By the way, speaking of boxing, are you bleeding on your chin?
I shaved. I took a shower just before the show, and I shaved, and I nicked myself. So I might bleed out. Be prepared to call 911 if all of a sudden, I duck off to the side and down I go like Apollo Creed, and you'll have to call the ambulance. But otherwise, bleeding or not, I'm one that toughs it out. So I'll be here.
You are a trooper. You're a true patriot. You're going to exsanguinate right here on Mormonism Live.
Yeah, maybe I'll rise up like, what's his name? Nehor?
And Nehor? Oh, you mean the guy with the head cut off and everything?
Shulam? Shem?
No. I think it's closer.
I love the fact that I've been so far removed from reading it on the regular that I am beginning to not be able to connect the dots to which prophets in the Book of Mormon, which characters in the Book of Mormon did what.
Shiz,
yeah.
It was either that or nearly headless Nick. Completely headless Shiz.
You got it.
So anyway, this is a lot of fun, but I got to tell you, sometimes that's a sign. If you cut yourself while shaving, it's not that the blade is too sharp. It's that it may be too dull and in need of replacement.
It's only my 3rd shave with this. It's the Harry's Razors, by the way. They're not a sponsor of the program, but a shout out to Harry's Razors. I really like them.
Yes.
But I just changed the blade. This is the 3rd cut with the new set of blades. And I would have expected better, but once in a while I do nick myself. My dad used to all the time, and he would take little pieces of toilet paper and put them all over his face, and he'd come out of the bathroom after shaving, and I would think he looked like the village idiot. And so I just licked my thumb and wiped off the blood, and let's move on.
Yes, if you like to bleed and get cut all over your face, use Harry's Razors. So there's our sponsor or ad for tonight. I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of money for that, if not a lawsuit. Anyway, you're having way too much fun. We're already almost 4 minutes into the show. We haven't even talked about what tonight's show is about. Tonight's show is titled False Mormon Prophecies. It's episode number 192 of Mormonism Live. Today's date is August 7th, 2024. And we have on the show tonight an individual that I met in person for the first time at Sunstroke just a few days ago. I think it was on Friday at lunch that I met this individual. His name, or at least his moniker, his nom de guerre, is Master Peace, P-E-A-C-E, Master Peace. Can we bring him on? There he is. There's Master Peace.
You have to unmute yourself. There you go, my friend.
Hey, how's it going?
It's just fine. Is that really the room behind you where you are ensconced?
I'd like to pretend so, but I just have a green screen.
Really? Well, Bill had a great Robin Leach impression.
I'm Robin Leach, and this is the lifestyles of the rich and famous, where we enjoy caviar dreams and champagne wishes.
That's what you look like tonight, Master Peace.
I'd like to believe that was real.
You have a smoking jacket on. You have a fully functional pipe in your left hand. You have an ascot, even though you said it was a cravat, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's a cravat, not an ascot. And you look quite posh. Where did you come up with this this look that you have?
I wanted to come up with a kind of a masterpiece theater genre style and tell stories about the past in Mormon history. So,
okay, very good. That was Alistair Cook, was it not? Masterpiece Theater. I never watched it. It was big when I was a kid. It was big like in the late 60s, I think early 70s. I'm aware of its existence. I mean, it was PBS, which was one of the 4 channels. It's the one I never watched. It was like anathema to me. Anything on PBS. Please, I get enough of being educated at school. I don't want to be talked to or learn anything when I'm watching TV. But yeah, it was a big, big deal. It was very popular. Alistair Cook. And we have you on tonight, but you're not going to be talking about a masterpiece in literature or film. You're going to be talking about false Mormon prophecies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Why did you come up with this as a subject to research, Masterpiece?
It's I've went through my faith transition, and I'm looking for ways that I can decide one way or the other whether Mormonism is true. So I've grew up in the church, 45 years a member, all in, all devout, everything. And then I start finding out that Joseph Smith did some polygamy that wasn't all that kosher, and various other things going on. And one of the things that I discovered in my I'd found this prophecy by Brigham Young a little bit earlier. It's the first one I'll bring up. But it's like, it was Brigham Young during the Civil War, and he's like, you guys are just wasting away your lives. You can't free the slaves. Only God can do this when the curse is done. And so all these millions of people that are dying in this war is just a waste. And I saw this, and I'm like, that's not how it happened. The war actually did free the slaves, and it did actually do some good. So I took this prophecy and I kind of put it on my shelf for a little bit. It kind of shook me up a little bit. Mm-hmm. When I'm going through my faith transition, I'm finding out that Joseph Smith is doing all this weird polygamy stuff behind Emma's back with already married women and girls as young as 14. And I'm comparing this with this other prophecy that I'd found. And like, it's just not right. This church cannot be what it claims to be. So I've been in a lot of debate forums about Mormonism, Christianity, or whatever, and I've found various arguments and honed my evidences, and I've kind of collected these prophecies that were had very specific dates and time frames and events that were going to happen, and so there's no wiggle room. You can't just say, well, he was just speaking as a man, or he was just theorizing this could be something that happened, or whatever. So I tried to find and pick the most clear-cut, obvious, these are definite prophecies, these are prophets speaking as a prophet type of thing. So this is the collection that I've come up with, and there are ones that I don't see used about very often. So
that's what I was going to mention, is that when you came up to me at the lunch table and started spouting off one or two of these, I thought, well, I hadn't heard that before. That's very interesting. It's outside the usual things that are discussed on podcasts like this. So I invited you to come on the show and share your research with us. So we'll be talking about these prophecies in and amongst them. There's around 6 or 7 that we'll be going through tonight with the documentation. So did you want to say anything by way of introduction before we begin with the first slide?
I are just to introduce the first slide, so I think we can just jump right in.
Okay. So blatantly false prophecies of the LDS Church, not just false prophecies, blatantly false prophecies of the LDS Church by Masterpiece.
Well, you have to have them be blatant, you guys, because if not, the apologist will find a loophole. So you have to.
Exactly. So whenever I bring up these topics, I bring up Deuteronomy 18. So we have this idea of there's a prophet and a test for the prophet to see if he really is who he claims to be. So we have in Deuteronomy 18, I will raise up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him.
So is this God talking to Moses here?
Shoot, I don't remember the background of it.
I think it is. We'll just pretend it is and go forward.
Okay. And it shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. But the prophet, which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or that shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die.
Boom, boom, boom.
And if thou say in thine heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord hath not spoken? When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken. But that prophet hath spoken it presumptuously. Thou shalt not be afraid of him.
So the test is pretty complicated here. If a prophet predicts something that's going to happen and it doesn't happen, then you can know that it's not a true prophet of God. Is that basically what this is saying?
That's what it's saying. And in the old days, they would put him to death. But I guess in modern ideas, where you have Wilford Woodruff saying that if a prophet were to try to lead the church astray, the Lord would remove him out of the path and take him away. So,
Right.
I would also just add here that the Old Testament early on is establishing, at least in terms of how Jews and Christians have sort of taken this and interpreted it and sort of cemented it. And every Christian denomination, including Mormonism, sort of looks at the Old Testament this way. And with Mormonism having a modern prophet, applies it there too, and then sort of changes it. I guess I'll say all that to say this, which is the Old Testament here in Deuteronomy 18 sets up the idea that, hey, there are prophets and they will prophesy. We can't twist that into some other role. Prophesying is the thing that they do. And if they prophesy and that thing come not to pass, then they are not a true prophet.
So when I'm trying to argue against Mormonism or whatever, or religion, I try to play within the rules that they have set for themselves. So this is one of the rules within their theology that they need to meet. So they've set this standard, and so I expect them to be able to live up to these standards, which they have agreed that these are the ground rules.
Right. And Masterpiece, just so you know, when this is brought up, usually by evangelical Christians in order to bash Mormons, right? The typical apologetic response, and I was apologist for a decade of my life back in my 20s. When this comes up, the typical apologetic response that I was trained to respond with was not to look at any prophecies made by Joseph Smith or any other church leader, but it was to look at prophecies in the Bible that did not come to pass. And there's a host of them. There's a slew of them. Christians hate those. And you bring those up and say, well, if you want to play by the rules of that game, then you're going to have a lot of trouble with this Deuteronomy 18 test of a prophet as well. Now, that is, of course, tu quo que, I think it is tu quo que argument, which means you too, which is also a logical fallacy, right? In other words, to respond to a criticism by saying, well, you do the same thing, does not address the criticism. It simply shifts focus to somewhere else. And that was what I was trained to do. We won't be doing that tonight, but we will just look at several prophecies made by LDS prophets, which appear to have been very specific and did not come to pass. So, did you want to say anything more about Deuteronomy 18 before we go to the first prophecy, Masterpiece?
Well, as I've shared these prophecies with a lot of Mormons, and invariably it doesn't affect them at all. They all find different ways to make these prophecies not matter or not to affect their testimony. I had one person I served a mission with that he insisted that these prophecies all did come to pass, but they occurred in other worlds in the multiverse. So they're
not in 616. They're in some other multiverse.
Yeah. So they're true prophecies. We just didn't get to see them. So I don't know why God would give us this test here in Deuteronomy 18 if they were just any prophecy that could happen would just be anywhere else. But basically, they're all wood tools that they're using to defend these arguments.
Yes. My response would be, so why did God give it in, multiverse 616 if it's not fulfilled in multiverse 616?
Yes.
God seems to be not doing this very well.
Yes.
And I say that as humbly as possible. I don't want to criticize God unduly, but this doesn't seem to be something that's increasing faith. Okay, so let's go to the first.
Actually, I've got one more scripture.
Oh, one more. Oh, yeah, 138. Go ahead.
What I, the Lord, have spoken, I have spoken, and I excuse not myself. And though the heavens and the earth shall pass away, my word shall not pass away. but shall all be fulfilled, whether by my own voice or by the voice of my servants. It is the same.
Right. And when I look at this verse now from Doctrine and Covenants, section 1, verse 38, the prologue to the Doctrine and Covenants, and where it says, I have spoken and I excuse not myself. No, he doesn't have to excuse himself, because he's got a whole bunch of people who are going to make all sorts of excuses for God and why it is he cannot seem to get anything right when it comes to prophetic utterances.
So if it's by his voice or the voice of his servants is the same and it doesn't come to pass, then obviously they're not God's servants.
I think it's a similar sentiment.
Yeah. So
all right, now for the first one. Okay, here we go.
So this is the one that I was talking about, where I had found this in my youth, or not in my youth, but just shortly before my transition out. This is Brigham Young talking about the Civil War right there in the middle of it. What is the cause of all this waste of life and treasure? To tell it all plain, truthful way, one portion of the country wished to raise their Negroes or black slaves, or other portion wished to free them, and apparently to almost worship them. Yeah. Well, raise and worship them, who cares? I shall never fight one moment about it, for the cause of human improvement is not in the least advanced by the dreadful war, which now convulses our unhappy country.
If I can break in to give the date of this, a lot of people who will listen to this will hear the audio version as opposed to watching the video. This was given by Brigham Young as an address on October 6th, 1863. So it's right in the middle of the Civil War, the American Civil War, which happened from 1861 to 1865. And it can be found in Journal of Discourses, Volume 10, page 250. Please continue.
Thank you. I should have cited that first. All right. Ham will continue to be the servant of servants, as the Lord has decreed, until the curse is removed. Will the present struggle free the slave? No. But they are now wasting away the black race by thousands.
Excuse me, can I just break in here?
Yep.
I thought the Civil War did free the blacks from slavery in America.
Yep.
I thought that happened. I thought that happened in 1865.
Yep. And the Emancipation Proclamation, that also ended the servitude in Utah, because Brigham Young was all for, they didn't want slavery in Utah because they didn't like the idea of beating or having intercourse with their slaves. So those were rules that he put against the servitude in Utah. But he thought the Mormons were the most appropriate to have black people as their servants, because they're God's chosen people.
So just to repeat, Brigham Young says Ham, which is a name that represents the black race, is the way he's using it.
That was Noah's. It was with Noah's son. So the slavery, the black curse went through Ham seed.
Right. Ham will continue to be the servant of servants, as the Lord has decreed, until the curse is removed. Will the present struggle free the slave? No. That seems pretty definitive.
It does.
All right, please continue.
Let me jump in and just say something here, which is, in Mormonism, there are these two ideas that the curse comes from, and I think this plays a part in what you're saying. So, because if you're allowed to have two different options for why the curse is there, then it sort of sounds like opinions rather than church doctrine, but actually both ideas go hand in hand. So one idea is that the curse comes through Ham, the son of Noah. The other idea, which also falls back to, I believe, Cain. And then the other idea is that spirits that were less valiant in the pre-earth life are born into bodies that have black skin, because the curse needs to continue from the pre-earth life. And they go hand in hand, that one is the physical body upon which they are in, and the other one is the spirits that are placed into those bodies. And then just to note that Brigham Young said essentially that people of color would never have the curse removed, not until after the millennium, which effectively is they will never, ever get it. You'll never notice it. It'll never happen. You'll never see it. And that the church, by giving people of color the priesthood in 1978, which was definitely a good move, effectively the church itself then made Brigham Young a false prophet in another way connected to this prophecy. So anyway.
It's funny in that Race and the Priesthood essay that it references the Brigham Young's talk in 1852 to the legislature, saying that, see, even back then they promised that the black people would get the priesthood eventually, and they reference that talk, but when you actually go and read it, you're like, they'll get it after all the other sons of Adam have received it, and at the very end of everything else. And it's not at all what they claim it to be. So
with a sleight of hand, they turn a false prophecy into a true one.
yeah.
And it's interesting too, because what Brigham Young is doing here is he is using theology in order to predict the future. And the theology that the Mormons had, as you just mentioned, is that Brigham Young believes that black people will not get the priesthood until the resurrection, until after every white person has been born and had the chance to receive the priesthood. Only after all of that happens and the last white person has accepted or rejected the priesthood does the first black person get a chance to receive the priesthood. Brigham Young was very clear about that. So coming from that position, theologically, his prophecy here makes absolute sense because it is based in Mormon theology. The problem is that when the prophecy doesn't come to pass, it not only indicates that Brigham Young is not a true prophet, it indicates that the theology upon which the prophecy was predicated is false as well. It's somewhat reminiscent of the same prediction, I'll call it a prediction, that Joseph Fielding Smith made back in the early 1960s after JFK made his rousing speech about wanting to go to the moon by the end of the decade. And Joseph Fielding Smith, as a senior apostle in the LDS Church, gave it as his very firm opinion that man will never go to the moon. They will never arrive there. And why does he say that? It's not just some kind of idea that comes into his head out of nowhere. It's based upon his understanding of Mormon theology, which is that the moon is a superior planet. It's a superior planet, a superior place based upon Abraham and chapter 3. So this is a superior world. Man cannot get there by his own devices. The only way he can get there is with God's help. And so he felt very comfortable based upon the theology, predicting that man would never reach the moon. And I think we have the same problem there, or the same issue there, is that man did get to the moon. I hate to break the news to you, all of you Capricorn 1 people out there who hopefully don't watch the show, but you may know somebody who does, that they actually did get to the moon in 1969, which indicates not only that Joseph Fielding Smith was not a true prophet when he made that prediction, even though he had the title as prophet, seer, and revelator as one of the quorum of the 12. He's not a true prophet, but the theology on which that prophecy or prediction was based is also incorrect.
Yeah. All right.
Now, do you want to continue that? We've talked about that for a bit.
Yeah, that's the gist of this one. There's a few paragraphs more I put on the slide if you want to see it, read it, but that's the gist of that one.
Okay.
Let's go on to the next one. So this is Joseph Smith. He's writing a letter to a newspaper editor, N.E. Seaton. You can find this in History of the Church, Volume 1, page 315 and 316. And here he is insisting that the lost 10 tribes are going to return in your lifetime. So this is, we've already started Zion in Missouri, and he's going to tell the people the great things, the miracles that we're going to have at Zion, and the troubles that are going to come forward, and this is how you can prepare for them. And now I am prepared to say, by the authority of Jesus Christ, that not many years shall pass away before the United States shall present such a scene of bloodshed as has not a parallel in the history of our nation. Pestilence, hail, famine, and earthquake will sweep the wicked of this generation from off the face of the land to open and prepare the way for the return of the lost tribes of Israel from the north country. The people of the Lord who have complied with the requirements of the new covenant have already commenced gathering together to Zion, which is in the state of Missouri. Therefore, I declare unto you the warning which the Lord has commanded to declare unto this generation, remembering that the eyes of my Maker are upon me, and that to him I am accountable for every word I say, wishing nothing worse to my fellow man than their eternal salvation. Therefore, fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. Repent ye, and embrace the everlasting covenant, and flee to Zion, before the overflowing scourge overtake you. For there are those now living upon the earth, whose eyes shall not be closed in death, until they see all these things which I have spoken fulfilled. Remember these things, call upon the Lord while he is near, and seek him while he may be found, is the exhortation of your unworthy servant, signed Joseph Smith, Jr.
Well, that sounds like that's supposed to happen before some people who were present on the earth died.
That's what I get from that as well. But I guess we still have the three Nephites and John the Revelator, which John is actually supposed to be with these lost tribes, hanging out with them. So I guess if you follow the oracle, where it would kind of give you some mysterious information about the future, but it would always have kind of an evil twist or something to it, or some kind of trick to what the prophecy. So if you believe that God does that kind of stuff, then you can accept that the three Nephites and John the Revelator qualify as still living upon the face of the earth.
No. They're not going to die. They're not going to close their eyes in death. That's BS. Okay. They have been changed. They have been translated. They are not going to die. So don't give me that.
Okay.
I don't believe that. However, I think that if it's 1833, this was given. Wasn't President Russell Nelson alive in 1833?
It sure feels like it.
No, honestly, 1833. If he's going to turn 100 here, God willing, in September of 2024, September 9th, I think, and hopefully he will make it. And but really, 1833, 100 years after that, 1933. That is almost 100 years ago. That a person who was born when Joseph Smith wrote this would have been 100 years old. So that is almost 200 years old. I think that the time is far past for this prophecy to have been fulfilled.
And I think it's gotten sort of worse. And what I mean by that is that back in 1840, this is an 1833 letter. Back then, there were still places in the world where we weren't quite sure what was there. And we didn't know if people lived there, if they didn't. I know that I think it was Bruce R. McConkie speculated that the 12 tribes, some of them anywhere, were underneath like the Arctic shelf or something. And there's been some crazy ideas, but now that we live in 2024, I mean, we pretty much know who exists on every piece of land on this planet. And it would be just at this point extremely absurd for a bunch of folks, the 10 lost tribes, to sort of just poke their head out of somewhere and show up.
Yeah, here we are, and we're coming down, and highways being cast up in the deep, I guess of ice or something. I don't know what it is that they walk over, and here they are, and they're ready to take their place with the Lamanites and the Mormons, the Mormon Gentiles, who are now part of the covenant as well.
There were prophecies that Joseph Smith was supposed to be there to lead the people out. He'd be there to see the ice, mountains of ice smashed, and the people come forward and the highway thrown up. And he would lead the people as they carry these great treasures from the North countries. And John the Revelator is with them. There's some really interesting prophecies with the 10 tribes, and we'll do a few more of them here tonight.
Oh, great. And right now, if people were to follow this advice in 1833 and flee to Zion, they'd be going to Jackson County and saying, where are all the Mormons at?
Yeah, this was just a year before they got kicked out. So,
yeah, actually, I think half a year before they got kicked out the first time in July of 1833.
Yeah,
they got kicked out from county to county, and then finally out of the entire state and went to Nauvoo. Anyway, regardless of those details, I think that's right, isn't it, Masterpiece? Like July 4th, 1833?
Somewhere around there. I know that 1834 was when they did the Zion's March.
Yes, to reclaim
the
land.
That was another prophecy that seems to have failed.
That was a bust. That was a bust.
Yeah.
I thought about this when I was looking at the slide, and I was thinking, if I were talking to a member of the church today and just asking them, so where is your church located? Where's the headquarters? And they said, well, Salt Lake City, of course. And then a person might say, well, isn't that the wrong place? I mean, aren't you supposed to be in Jackson County, Missouri? And doesn't the fact that your headquarters is in the wrong place, according to your own prophecy, suggest to you that maybe you're not the right church?
You would think so. But
yes, I've got a lot of clarity after disassociating myself somewhat from my orthodoxy in Mormonism. There's a clarity that's come to me that I never had when I was trying to twist and do all these mental gymnastics to make these things work somehow.
Yeah.
So there's Joseph Smith and the Lost 10 Tribes. What's the next one?
All right, we've got Parley Pratt. So Parley Pratt, we used to do all sorts of pamphlets and booklets to rebut arguments. So he was like one of the early apologists for the Mormonism. So somebody would publish something mean about the church, and he would publish something in response and tell them how wrong they are. And so this is, there was a Reverend L.R. Sunderland who's arguing that you got the Book of Mormon, but there's nothing useful in it. We can't test the Book of Mormon because it doesn't give any prophecies or any locations or dates or anything that we can really find. Therefore, we can't really, it's not a valid piece of scriptures because we can't test it. And so Pratt comes in to save the day and tell us that sure enough, we got plenty to work with. So this is in 1838, a pamphlet called Mormonism Unveiled, rebutting L.R. Sunderland's claim that the Book of Mormon cannot be proven. Again, he says, there are no predictions peculiar to this book yet to be fulfilled. No names of persons or places or periods of time are referred to by which anything definite can be known as to what is meant by the jargon of Mormon prophets. Now, Mr. Leroy Sunderland, we will prove to the world that this is one of the most barefaced falsehoods ever uttered by man. The Book of Mormon contains many prophecies, yet future, with names, places, and dates so definite that a child may understand. Indeed, it is one of the peculiar characteristics of the Book of Mormon that its predictions are plain, simple, definite, literal, positive, and very express as to the time of their fulfillment.
Wow, somebody's been winnowing the thesaurus. I have trouble saying that line every time. Winnowing the thesaurus.
And I have the link on this slide if you come in here later and you want to see it, but it has a link to archive.org where you can see this pamphlet that Parley Pratt wrote.
I know there's 3 parts to this slide. Can we give the citation for it? Or you already have, really. It's Mormonism Unveiled, right? His 1838 pamphlet. Okay, we'll just continue then until we get to the 3rd slide.
Okay. So, also on page 123, 2nd edition of the Book of Mormon. Woe be unto the Gentiles, saith the Lord God of hosts, for notwithstanding I shall lengthen out my arm to them from day to day. They will deny me. See also page 514. And read the fate of our nation and the fate of the Indians of America in the day that the Gentiles should reject the fullness of the gospel. See also page 526, where a sign is given, and the time clearly set for the restoration and the gathering of Israel from their long dispersion, namely the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, should be the sign.
Okay, hang on a second.
Sure.
Okay, that has always struck me as a little bit circular. Okay, the sign that the Book of Mormon says is going to initiate the commencement of the last days is the Book of Mormon. That seems like an easy prophecy to make. Of course, if it actually got fulfilled and Jesus had come back in the time that it was being predicted, then it would have been amazing.
It would have.
But it's just like saying, if I wrote a book and said, it's going to be the last days and the sign of the last days is the book that I'm writing, then that seems to me, like I said, a little circular. What do you think, Bill? Bill, I'm having trouble hearing you, my friend.
Sorry, I had it muted. The churches on several occasions predicted Christ's return. The Joseph Smith prophecy that we were talking about earlier on the phone, 85 years or whatever. You have sort of a moment here. I don't know what else to add to it. I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm sorry, I don't really have any extra thing to add.
You're doing great. Just want to make sure that you're included in the conversation.
Yeah, I'll jump in when as I have so far.
I'm reminded of the meme of like the Bible and says, I know the Bible is true because the Bible says so. And then they show a picture of a power strip with the power plug plugged into the power strip. So it's plugged into itself. And
oh, okay. Very good. Very good. So go ahead and continue, please.
All right. Let's see. Also, page 527, where all who will not hearken to the Book of Mormon shall be cut off from among the people, and that too in the day that comes forth to the Gentiles and is rejected by them. And not only does this page set the time for the overthrow of our government and to all other Gentile governments on the American continent, but the way and means of this utter destruction are clearly foretold. Namely, the remnant of Jacob will go through among the Gentiles and tear them in pieces like a lion among the flocks of sheep. Their hand shall be lifted up upon their adversaries, and all their enemies shall be cut off. This destruction includes an utter overthrow and desolation of all our cities, forts, and strongholds, an entire annihilation of our race, except such as embrace the covenant and are numbered with Israel. Now, Mr. Sunderland, you have something definite and tangible, the time, the manner, the means, the names, the dates, and I will state as a prophecy that there will not be an unbelieving Gentile upon this continent 50 years hence, and if they are not greatly scourged and in a great measure overthrown within 5 or 10 years from this date, then the Book of Mormon will have proved itself false.
That's pretty clear, huh?
It is very clear.
It is very clear, and I think I'm following what Parley's saying, is that the Book of Mormon itself not only says that it's coming forth as a sign of the second coming, but that it's like it sets the clock ticking to the prophecies that are contained within the Book of Mormon. By the way, I expect that some of these prophecies, if not all of them, come from those chapters in 3rd Nephi, where Jesus shows up and he is making predictions to the Nephites. Now, these are chapters in the Book of Mormon that we typically skip over and don't talk about very much in the church. But I know that he talks about it there. So what Parley's saying is, look, this sets off the clock, the Book of Mormon coming forth, which it already has by the time he's writing this, about 8 years before or so. And now he's saying that clock has started ticking, and the prophecies in the Book of Mormon are going to come to pass within 50 years of the date he's writing this. So by 1888, right? And he thinks it'll probably actually be much shorter or sooner than that, 5 or 10 years. But he's given himself an out, some leeway there, a date beyond which Parley probably wouldn't even expect to be alive. And I see this happening quite a bit. A lot of times these prophecies are out beyond the expected lifespan of the person who is making the prophecy, which for some reason seems to make people much bolder in their predictions than they would be if they were talking about, I don't know, tomorrow or next year.
Yeah. Parley Pratt also wrote a fabulous fan fiction story of what the millennium will be like, titled 100 Years Hence. If you look on this on archive.org, 100 Years Hence by Parley Pratt, if you are inclined in a place where that's legal, take a few hits of something strong, and you'll really enjoy his explanation of what the millennium will be like. So Pangea has recurred, and the prophet Joseph Smith and all these other prophets are back, and the rest people are there for the millennium, and Jesus is having a big festival day, and they find these ruins of the great city New York, and it's really quite entertaining to read. But take some marijuana or something first, and it'll be fun.
So this prophecy seems to me really remarkable because it's not just Parley P. Pratt's prophetic promises. I'm auditioning for General Conference. Parley P. Pratt's predictive promises that are at stake here, but the Book of Mormon itself, or at least his interpretation of the Book of Mormon. And I'll tell you something: if there's somebody out there who knows the Book of Mormon better than Parley Pratt did, go ahead and step forward. Okay, raise your hand. He knew it pretty well, backward and forward. And he is saying that if this doesn't happen within 50 years, and probably 5 or 10 years, but within 50 years by 1888, that the nation will be overthrown. There's not going to be a white person alive on the land that's not a Mormon, is what he's saying.
And I think that this has actually proven itself out, because he says if this doesn't happen, then the Book of Mormon will have proved itself false. So yes. I think we got a winner here.
Yeah, at least according to Parley Pratt, the Book of Mormon has proven itself to be false.
Not speaking directly of Jesus's coming here, but it strikes me that I heard recently somewhere here in Mormonism that there is a group of Latter-day Saints, or maybe some tangent of Mormonism, where they sort of believe that Christ has already come back again. And the Jehovah's Witnesses play this game too, where a prophecy is put into place, the prophecy doesn't come true, so hence the only loophole is to say, well, it did come true, we just didn't see it, it's happening out there in the shadows. And it's a game that apologists play with lots of these, and I know we're not spending time on that tonight, but it just strikes me that anytime you present a Latter-day Saint with something like this, or an apologist of the church with something like this, they have some really squirmy way to get out of these things that isn't rational. It allows it to sort of still be in the shadows, but it's happened. And this one strikes me as one that they could do that with.
Right. When it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses, who had a prediction, among others, that Jesus would return in 1914, and Jesus doesn't show up. But thank God World War I starts. And so, we can say, oh, well, this happened instead. And Jesus Christ actually did come, but he didn't show himself to everybody. He sort of came down from space and took up a stationary orbit around planet Earth. So he didn't quite touch down on terra firma, which would be the actual second coming. But then they changed it to say there are those who are alive in 1914 who will not die before they see Jesus coming again. And you don't hear that a lot anymore because that's been over 100 years ago. It's been 10 years ago. I think it is 110 years ago. I suppose there might be some people out there, you start looking at your actuarial tables when you are trying to figure out how to make this prophecy work. But we can look at that as Mormons and point fingers and make fun of the Jehovah's Witnesses for believing something so ridiculous. And yet we will be all attentive and give ear to Wendy Nelson, for example, President Nelson's wife, who back in 2016 in January at the devotional, the young adult devotional from BYU, Hawaii, if memory serves, where she indicated quite strongly that Jesus had already returned and that he was showing himself to select groups of the most faithful members of his church, and that the world doesn't know about it. You wouldn't know this by looking at the internet or social media. People don't know about it. It's happening in secret. You see, if it's a Mormon leader or the wife of a Mormon leader who says this kind of nonsense, then we're all ears. But if it's the Jehovah's Witnesses who say the same thing, well, they're crazy. How silly, how stupid would you have to believe something like that?
Right.
And there's a third slide on this, I think.
Yes. So I have this book. So when I found this prophecy, I thought, shoot, I need to get, I'm scouring through archive.org and I'm looking for all these things that he's saying. And there's got to be like a single source that I can get all these. So I got this book, The Writings of Parley Pratt, made by Parley Pratt Robeson, one of his descendants. And it has all of his publications and writings in here. And I looked straight for this prophecy, and I took a picture of it with my phone here. And you'll see that where he gets to, now, Mr. Sunderland, you have some definite, tangible time, manner, means, names, and dates. It just ends right there. So it skips the whole part where he says, I prophesy, and within 50 years, this whole thing will be. So yeah, he just cuts out the whole prophecy.
Bill, can you flip that back to the... Okay, so now, Mr. Sunderland, at the very bottom paragraph, you have something definite and tangible. The time, the manner, the means, the names, the dates, right? And that is what is reproduced in the book. Can you flip back to the next slide? Okay, the names and dates, period, right? And then they omit the next part. If we can go back to the last slide. And this is the part that's omitted. And I will state as a prophecy that there will not be an unbelieving Gentile upon this continent 50 years hence. And if they are not greatly scourged and in a great measure overthrown within 5 or 10 years from this date, then the Book of Mormon will have proved itself false. All that was taken out of the record in the publication of this book that you were referring to. Is that right, Masterpiece?
Yes. And it just totally pissed me off. We don't know if he's going to remove random things without any kind of notification. The whole book is worthless because you don't know what else is pulled out. So I have this book and I haven't been able to trust it for anything else, because if he's going to leave this out, who knows what else he's leaving out.
And you know that anybody reading, especially his progeny, right? As they're reading it, they know that that's a prophecy, and they know that prophecy didn't come true, and they know that it made a claim about the Book of Mormon not being true as well. And you start to notice, like, why would you take that out? It's obviously intentional. You're trying to deceive the reader. And once you, like you said, once you know you're playing games, you have no idea where else you're playing games.
And the thing that is especially execrable about this omission is the fact that it is not noted in any way that there is missing text here. There are no ellipses. There are no asterisks across the middle of the page. There is absolutely nothing to indicate that the author took out a segment of this sermon or this letter, this pamphlet written by Parley Pratt to the reader. So the intent is obviously to deceive the reader into not knowing that there was a prophecy that was completely failed by the time this book was published. Now, by the way, did you say this was the second edition that you have the slide of here?
This is the first edition of this book.
Oh, the first edition. What was the publication date? I'm guessing it was after 1888, but we'll see.
This is, oh shoot, did it say easily? 1952.
I am such a prophet. I just guessed. I predicted it was after 1888, and it was way after 1952, right?
Yes.
So by the time this is written and compiled by this person who's a descendant of Parley Pratt, they know this prophecy is bogus. They know the Book of Mormon has been proven false, according to Parley Pratt's own words. Therefore, when we reproduce the pamphlet, we'll just take that out and not give anybody any indication that it was there in the first place.
You're definitely more of a true prophet than whoever wrote these prophecies.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I can see around corners. So what's the next slide?
All right. So now we're back to Wilford Woodruff and the 10 Tribes. So this is in 1857, February 22nd. We got Wilford Woodruff in the Journal of Discourses, Volume 4, page 231 to 232. And this is another one of my favorite ones. This is one of the first ones I collected after my faith transition. Again, here are the 10 tribes of Israel. We know nothing about them, only what the Lord has said by his prophets. There are prophets among them, and by they will come along, and they will smite the rocks, and the mountains of ice will flow down at their presence, and a highway will be cast up before them, and they will come to Zion, receive their endowments, and be crowned under the hands of the children of Ephraim. And there are persons before me in this assembly today who will assist to give them their endowments. They will receive their blessings and endowments from under the children of Ephraim, who are the first fruits of the kingdom of God in this dispensation. And the men will have to be ordained and receive their priesthood and endowments in the land of Zion according to the revelations of God.
So in 1857, Wilford Woodruff prophesies that the 10 tribes of Israel will come back and receive their endowments by the Mormons, the children of Ephraim. And there are persons before me in this assembly today who will assist to give them their endowments. So that was 1857. That's 150, 60, 74 years ago. Is that right? Those people are pretty old. I don't know if they're even capable of giving any endowments at this point.
I've seen some old people in the temple. They look pretty fragile in there, but they're
true.
yeah.
Well, this is the reverse. Instead of living people doing work for the dead, this is going to be dead people doing work for the living.
Yes. Okay, he doubles down on this in 1875. Wilford Woodruff does this again. Journal of Discourses, volume 18, page 38. The prophets which have been shut up in the north country with the 9.5 tribes led away by Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, thousands of years ago, will come in remembrance before God. They will smite the rocks, and mountains of ice will flow down before them. And those long-lost tribes will come forth in your day and mine, if we just live a few years longer, and they will be crowned under the hands of the children of Ephraim. The elders of Israel who dwell in the land of Zion.
So this was a very important kind of prophecy for Wilford Woodruff to revisit it. So 1857 to 1875, that's like what, 18 years later?
Yep.
I think so. 18 years later, he wants to revisit it. He's going to double down on it, as you say. And the fact that he doubles down on it only makes it more glaring that it's wrong. Yes. Because we're talking 2024. We're looking back. I'm not seeing any long-lost tribes coming down from the north. Did that happen and I just didn't see it?
I haven't seen any highways with ice and everything coming down, so I'm guessing it hasn't happened yet.
Did you see that, Bill? Because I know I have a public school education, so maybe I didn't learn about this. Did you learn about this?
I'm a college dropout, so you've done better than me. It's made even worse by the fact that at least some portion of the lost people were the Lamanites, who the Book of Mormon was written to. And now with Book of Mormon DNA, we can't even identify a people that we used to be able to identify. And so not only are we not able yet to identify the people that we were supposed to have identified by now, we no longer can identify the people that we used to be able to identify. And so it is getting worse and worse.
Yes.
Masterpiece, can I just make this passing observation? And I don't mean to be too critical of Joseph Smith, but, he made a lot of claims, and a lot of his claims had to do with the past. It had to do with history. Even in his day, it was history, ancient history, about the Americas, about Jewish people coming to the Americas, about the book of Abraham, all sorts of claims that he made in writing and translations and otherwise. And pretty much none of them panned out. None of them correspond with what we understand about history today. And then going the opposite direction, not only did he make claims about the past, but he also made claims and predictions about the future. And really, really, very few of those have come to pass. I want to at least carve out the exception for the fact that the church did grow. It has become an international church, which is something that he talked about. So I think we have to at least give him that one. But by and large, we shouldn't even be around to be talking about this right now, because I think all three of us are unbelieving Gentiles in the land of the Americas, in the United States. We shouldn't even be here being able to have this discussion if the prophets of the LDS Church were actually prophets.
Yep. It's interesting that in 1833, December 18th, he had a little gathering with his friends and family, and was giving him patriarchal blessings. And he's blessing like Oliver Cowdery, that he'll have such great wealth with dromedaries and platinum and gold and all these great things. And he was, Oliver Cowdery later blessed him that he'll have all these great things, wealth and platinum. And they're just planning on moving into Missouri and just kind of having this whole city built up for them with their palaces, and all the nations are going to flow unto them and bring them great treasures and wealth. And they'll just sit there and bask in the wisdom of Joseph Smith and his friends. And they didn't get to see the wealth in those days, but nowadays they really have all the wealth that Joseph fantasized and more. So I think it's gone beyond his wildest dreams, as their wealth wise anyway.
So Joseph Smith was a true prophet, is what you're saying?
The PROFIT. Yeah.
All right.
He didn't get to enjoy it, but his successors certainly did.
Yes. Well, no greater love hath any man than he who would give his wealth to his friends. So Wilford Woodruff's 1868 this is a new prophecy now?
Yeah, so this is 1868. He is up in Logan. He's got Brigham Young with him. There's a conference that they're having, and he's regaling them of stories. So like, in 30 years, this is what you're going to be saying about what we're seeing now. So you'll look back in 30 years and talk about the time that we came up and told you all these great things that are going to happen. So when these boys and girls meet together 30 years hence in 1898 and converse together upon the scenes of this visit, what will be their conversation? It will be something like the following. Oh, a great change has taken place since the prophet Brigham Young and the apostles visited us in Logan in 1868. Then it was a new country with but few inhabitants, not more than 10,000 people in all Cache Valley. Then we had no tabernacle or temple in this valley. Now we have a great tabernacle and a great temple built upon the high bench of Logan, and we can be drawn to the top of its towers by machinery, where we can view the glory of this valley filled with cities and magnificent palaces and towers occupied by 1 million of the saints. Just to reflect back, stop back here. He's talking about elevators in the Logan Temple that he's going to have built there. When I was going through my faith transition, I'm writing down the list of prophecies that I remember that were things that they said that came true. There was miraculous things that could have only happened because they were prophets. And one of them was that the Salt Lake Temple was built with these shafts, and nobody knew what these weird shafts were for. But Brigham Young, he had the insight to know that someday they were going to invent elevators, and they would install them in the temple, and people would be able to go up and down in this building. I looked on Wikipedia right before this. Otis built his first safety elevator in a building in New York in 1853, I think. So 15 years later, they're talking about these great elevators that are going to be in the temple someday.
So Brigham Young may not have been able to see around corners, but he could definitely look up your shaft.
Yeah. So this thing that I was told in the past, that it was a great prophecy, that some of the great, amazing insights that God gave Brigham Young to put in the construction of the temple, he already knew about them. Anyway, so we got these palaces and towers occupied by 1 million of the saints of God who can come up to the temple on Logan Bench and get their endowments and blessings in their turn. Then our fields of grain and gardens were half sunflowers and weed. But since then, by the commandment of God, no man occupies more land than he can keep clean of weeds and beautify. Then we had no shade in our streets, but now our streets are adorned with the mulberry tree from which we make our silk, which now adorns our bodies and the bodies of our children. Going on. Then the Apostle E.T. Benson and Bishop Mon presided over us. Since then, they have gone with President Young and others to Jackson County, Missouri, to build the great temple and the New Jerusalem. This visit was in 1868. Then we were children. Now it is 1898, and great changes have taken place since that day throughout Great Babylon, as well as in Mount Zion. That year was the great election for the presidency of the United States. Grant and Colfax were the candidates for the Black Republicans, and Seymour and Blair for the Democrats. Then the nation felt strong and powerful. But since then, it has been broken to pieces. That visit was before the destruction of the city of New York by the sea heaving beyond its bounds and washing the inhabitants into the sea, and they were drowned. It was before Albany was utterly destroyed by fire. It was before Boston was sunk with an earthquake. It was before Chicago was struck with lightning and burned with fire and brimstone for their abominations.
The Chicago fire right there prophesied.
Yep, there we go. It was before the many millions of the people of the United States and other nations and the earth were destroyed with their cities by the great judgments of God because of their great sins and wickedness in the sight of heaven and earth.
I honestly have not heard of any of this stuff. I blame my public education.
So there was a revelation in the DNC that Albany, New York, and Boston would be destroyed. It didn't give a deadline for when that was going to happen, but it was supposed to be fairly soon. And so Woodruff is referring to that prophecy there and giving it a definite time frame. I think there was a separate one. Some people were supposed to be sent to Chicago to prophesy or to preach unto them before they would be destroyed. So those are two. I think those were those two events. That's why he's describing those cities specifically.
Right, and he's sort of elaborating upon that and adding other cities, to the list. By the way, I'll go ahead and finish this, and then I'll mention something about the significance of the 30-year prophecy into 1898, which is where he places this.
This was before the United States became so weakened and broken to pieces that they called upon Brigham Young to take the presidency of the United States to save the Constitution and the remnant of the nation from utter destruction. If this will not be the conversation of those little children who were in the procession with their banners to welcome the prophet and apostles on their entrance into this city, 30 years from this, it will be something like it. At the close of the meeting, so this is Brigham Young or Wilford Woodruff writing in his journal. He's describing everything, and he's recording the whole revelation and the event of this conference. And then he writes, at the close of the meeting, President Young said my remarks were given by revelation.
Absolutely. Anything that has me becoming president of the United States by public acclaim is revelation as far as I'm concerned, says Brigham.
Absolutely. So this is a Wilford Woodruff Journals, Volume 6, page 421 to 423 on August 22nd, 1868.
Great. So 30 years. 1898 is when he says this is going to be the conversation. Or in other words, by this time, all this stuff will have happened, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
In his way of, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and when you consider everything that happens with the government's fight against the church regarding polygamy, I mean, not only does this not occur, but again, it gets worse and worse and worse. The church is can't even get its apostles into to be representatives of the country politically, and there's a bunch of stuff going on with the Reed Smoot hearing and B.H. Roberts and Wilford Woodruff here is not only failing in the prophecy about Brigham Young becoming president, but the church is in no position to help the U.S. government at all over the next 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, they're kind of taking it in the shorts from the U.S. government at this time frame that he's prophesying of. Great point. But 1898 is significant because it's after 1890 and 1891. Now, I think we all know, I think it's section 130 of the Doctrine and Covenants. It might be 31, but I think it's 130 where Joseph Smith talks about praying to know when Jesus would come again, and the cryptic answer coming, if you live to be 85 years old, you'll see Jesus. And he says, I was left to wonder whether this meant a personal visitation or whatever. And that puts it in 1890 or 1891. Joseph Smith, having been born at the very end of the year, December 23rd of 1805, that means he would have been 85, December 23rd of 1890. And for the rest of 1891, up until December 23rd of that year, he would be 85 years old. This is something that we hardly hear about at all in the church anymore. And when we do hear about it, it's with all the caveats about that it wasn't clear what it was talking about, blah, blah, blah. But the saints at this time, including Wilford Woodruff, including Orson Pratt, including many of them, believed that Jesus Christ would come before 1891 was finished. And if that happens, they also understood the revelations, particularly in the book of Moses, that prophesied that the saints would return to Jackson County, Missouri, build up Zion in preparation for Jesus to come again. So if Jesus is coming again in 1891, at least by the end of the year deadline, they have to return to Zion. And so that's why Wilford Woodruff, I believe, is talking about in 1898, President Brigham Young will have gone to Zion. I suppose I'm not sure. Is he going to rule as president of the United States from Zion? I guess he's going to do both. He's going to be in Jackson County. He's also going to be the president of the United States. And all that stuff's going to happen. I think that's why it is that he's very certain of this date and of this prophecy. One of the things he doesn't know, besides the fact it's not going to happen, which was a great disappointment, I think, to the church at the close of 1891, when not only has Jesus not come back, they haven't even gotten close to being able to return to Jackson County, Missouri.
Right.
And still haven't as of 2024 when we're recording this. Another thing he didn't know is that in 11 years, in 1877, Brigham Young would die. So he would not be able to be doing much of anything in Jackson County or Washington, D.C., or Utah for that matter, in 1898. And that'll be reflected in the next slide, won't it? Did you have anything you want to say about this, Master D?
So Wilford realizes by 1884 that none of these things are happening. Brigham Young's already dead,
yes,
and nothing is close to happening. So what does he do? He rewrites a journal entry for 1868 describing his conference address, and he completely rewrites the address and the revelation that he gave. So this is what he wrote instead for his new, updated, revised, and improved 1868 journal entry. Now, my young friends, I wish to remember these scenes which you are witnessing during the visit of President Young and his brethren. You, my young friends, treasure up the teachings and sayings of these prophets and apostles as precious treasures, while they are living men, and don't wait until they are dead. A few days, and President Young and his brethren, these prophets and apostles, and Brother Benson and Mon, will be in the spirit world.
Wait a second. That's a huge change.
That's a minor tweak. It's just a little smudge.
Well, it's helpful when he's writing it in 84, 7 years after Brigham Young has died.
Yes, yes.
Now he's recasting what he said in 1868.
It's kind of like how we can date writings in the Bible by when the prophecies happened. We can tell if they were specific enough. We can tell that they happened after the events, and this is very much like that.
I get this crazy feeling that as we're looking at Wilford Woodruff's diary changes and other things that you brought up tonight, Masterpiece, that we're also getting kind of an insight into maybe some of the ways in which some of the Bible was composed.
Yeah. So you should never forget this visitation. You are to become men and women, fathers and mothers. Yea, the day will come after your father and these prophets and apostles are dead and gone into the spirit world. You will have the privilege of going into the tower of a glorious temple built unto the name of the Most High God, east of us upon the Logan bench. And while you stand in the tower of that temple, and your eyes survey this glorious valley, filled with cities and village, occupied with tens of thousands of Latter-day Saints, no longer millions.
Not millions anymore, huh?
Millions.
So now it's down to tens of thousands.
You will then call to mind this visitation of President Young and his company. You will say, that was in the day when President Benson and Mon presided over us. That was the day when President Young and his apostles were still with us. That was before New York was destroyed by an earthquake.
So New York's still going to get destroyed?
Yes, because that's in the DNC.
Okay.
It was before Boston was swept into the sea by the sea heaving beyond its bounds. It was before Albany was destroyed by fire. Yea, at that time you'll remember the scenes of this day, treasure them up and forget them not. He doesn't say when it's going to happen. It's going to be after he dies. So sometime in the future, but still in the lifetime of these people, so that he's teaching to them. They'll be adults by this time, but it'll be after he's dead, so he doesn't have to worry about it.
But President Young followed him and once again said that what Wilford Woodruff had said was revelation.
And all would be fulfilled.
So I guess it's both revelation. By the way, it does occur to me that that section in the Doctrine and Covenants sounds kind of Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi-esque, doesn't it? With the destruction of the different cities by fire and by water and all these kinds of things when Jesus comes again to show how much he loves us. That all that stuff's going to happen, and that these things were associated also with Jesus' second coming or immediately precedent to it.
So this next slide is another one of my favorites. So just like Parley Pratt's descendant left out that revelation, here we have fair Mormon, or whatever they call themselves today. This is from their website. You can find the link on the slide. I'm not going to read the whole URL. But they have a question. Did Wilford Woodruff prophesy that New York would be destroyed by earthquake, Boston by flood, and Albany by fire? Answer. Woodruff did make such a prophecy, and Young confirmed it. However, that Woodruff nowhere makes a prophecy that this will happen within the mortal lives of those attending.
Of course not. Why would he make a prophecy that would happen within the mortal lives of those attending, even though he said, what was it? In 30 years, the people who are present will be saying this?
Well, Fair is only reciting this updated diary entry. So they completely skip the 1838 or the 1868 version. They only give the revised version.
They must not have known about that. They must not have known about the original version at Fair because they would never try and deceive anybody, would they, Bill? You used to work for them, didn't you? Bill, didn't you used to work for Fair? They would never do that, would they?
They would never answer a different question than the one that's being asked, or use a source that's more beneficial to them than the other that would not be as beneficial. No, they would never play any mind tricks or games with this stuff. That's why they're called Fair Mormon, is because they're the fair Mormons. Yeah, they're fair.
But even in the revised one, they're definitely saying that these youth will be going up to the temple and seeing these things. It's going to happen if it's not in their lifetime, then God is a cruel God giving twisted revelations like the oracle from Greek mythology or wherever these prophecies come. They always have this little sadistic twist that make you think one thing and it's all fulfilled in a tricky way instead. So this is
I feel like Bill is playing the song Who Let the Dogs Out down at his house.
My dog is barking.
If he keeps doing that, you could train him, and around Christmas time, he could be barking jingle bells.
Yeah, we could try that. Get him to hum a few bars, you know.
So this next line from Fair really pisses me off. Okay. The critics' account typically ignores, however, that Wilford Woodruff nowhere makes prophecy that this will happen in the mortal lives of those attending. He's blaming the critics for misunderstanding this prophecy that
those so-called critics.
Those guys, they will confuse you, they'll mislead you, they'll deceive you by any means necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the people who are saying that are the ones who are hiding the actual original prophecy that does state that it would happen within the lifetime of those attending.
And within the next 30 years. Yeah.
Yes.
It's natural to read the prophecy as referring to the mortal life, but prophets are clear that many prophecies will only be fulfilled following the resurrection during Christ's millennial reign. There is nothing in there that says that'll happen after Christ's millennial reign. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
I like the part that says this prophecy can easily be fulfilled during the millennial years of the Lord. And I stop and I think, wait a second.
These are things
the millennium, that's supposed to be 1,000 years of peace. What is God doing destroying cities?
Yeah. So maybe Fair will find out that we're calling them out on this, and maybe they'll change their website. But I've got
not a chance.
They've done it once or twice over the last 50 years where they've updated their site to reflect something that we pointed out, but it doesn't happen often enough. That's for sure.
Well, the big update in their site that I remember is when they erased you from a presentation at Fair Mormon. Do I have that correct, Mr. Real?
You can't find me anymore in all the things that I did. That's a real sad shame.
These guys are liars and deceivers at Fair, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And we're showing right now why that is. If you care to debate me about that, please contact me. We'll have you on the show, Fair. Scott Gordon, though. Scott Gordon, we need someone who's in charge and can speak authoritatively for Fair and why you were trying to deceive people about the truth.
Yeah, yep. I'd love that interview.
Yeah, I'll be holding my breath on that one.
Yeah, this one really pissed me off when I first read this, and they're supposed to be the good guys, and we're supposed to be the ones that are deceiving everyone, and we're the ones explaining everything that they're trying to hide. So,
wow. Lorenzo Snow.
So this is another fun one. So this is the April 1898 General Conference Report.
Okay, so now it is 8 years, or at least 7 years after the great disappointment that the Latter-day Saints experienced when the prophecy that they understood from Joseph Smith that Jesus would have come by 1891, by the time that year was over.
Yeah.
And so now this is the context in which this is being stated, I believe. And Lorenzo Snow is talking about hundreds in the congregation will return to Missouri to build the temple. Right. So you got to understand, I know you're disappointed. It's been 7 years. We were supposed to go back. They're going through their own adjustments of the entire prophetic timeline. And here he says something in General Conference it is in April.
Yes. So he's in the first presidency right now. It's a year before he becomes prophet. This is the year that Wilford Woodruff's prophecy was supposed to come true, where they're supposed to be able to stand up on top of the temple and see all the million people in Cache Valley with the palaces and towers. And they were already supposed to be back to Missouri by then.
That's right. President Brigham Young was going to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
According to the first prophecy, according to the updated prophecy by Wilford Woodruff, he was just going to be in the spirit world.
Right, right. So the time is speedily coming. We do not want to talk very much, though, about going to Jackson County, Missouri.
I wonder why.
Because through our foolishness and weakness, we would not care anything about building houses and making ourselves comfortable here. I know when we first started a colony in Brigham City, the people generally thought it was nonsense, perfectly useless to plant peach trees and apple trees, currant bushes and like, because we were going to Jackson County so speedily that it was with utmost effort that we were enabled to disabuse them of this idea.
Can you hang on just a second, Masterpiece?
Yep.
Okay. This is what happens when a prophecy fails to materialize. When Jesus Christ doesn't come back like he's been prophesied to come back, when the saints have not returned to Jackson County to build up Zion, like they were prophesied to go back to Jackson County and build up Zion. It is never God's fault. It is never the prophet who uttered the prophecy's fault. It is always the freaking members.
Yes.
And their nonsense that causes these things to happen. And that is where the blame always gets laid. And that is what I'm seeing here as well.
So we are not going tomorrow, nor the next day, nor this week, nor next week.
Well, hang on. He was right about that. I guess he was a true prophet.
But we are going. And there are many, hundreds and hundreds within the sound of my voice that will live to go back to Jackson County and build a holy temple to the Lord our God.
Wrong again.
Be prepared to do these things that have been taught us during this conference, and make ourselves worthy, and we will receive everything I've read to you in this section.
Right. And so it didn't happen. He's a false prophet, but comes in the apologist and says, no, he said that you have to be worthy. They weren't worthy. It's their fault again. It's always the members' fault. God just doesn't have quite the bead on the future that we would expect an omniscient being to have. And he keeps getting fouled up in his prophecies by the members of the church.
Well, the next one is Lorenzo Snow doubles down on this prophecy again on this page. And he doesn't give that out here. So this is 1899. He is now the prophet. He calls a solemn assembly in the Salt Lake Temple. And there are hundreds of people. It's like 700 people or something that they've squeezed into the assembly room in the Salt Lake Temple. And this comes from Rutger Clausen's journal from July 2nd, 1899. And if you look on the slide, you can see the archive.org link to this journal. So Signature Books published a bunch of journals, and this is going to be in that one. And these are hard to find journals. They only printed some of them, like 500 copies on some of them.
I'm feeling hot and claustrophobic just reading the description of this meeting on July 2nd of 1899.
This is the middle of July in the upper room of the temple. There's no air conditioning. You have 700 people or some odd crammed into this thing. It's got to be miserable.
Or at least the middle of summer.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. President Snow said, "It may seem strange you're being called together, but when you understand the object of the meeting, you will understand the importance of it. Read section 104 and a portion of section 85, D and C, said that if the brethren present lived 10, 15, or 20 years, or perhaps less, they would go back to Jackson County. The time for returning to Jackson County is much nearer than many suppose, and it is the faithful that would be selected to go, and they will be required to accept the united order." We go a couple of paragraphs into the journal entry, and then we come back to Snow. "The Lord has forgiven us of our carelessness in paying our tithing in the past, but he will forgive us no longer. And if we do not obey this law, we will be scattered as were the saints in Jackson County, and this by reason of the knowledge we have attained to. What I say is as true as God lives. We must teach this people the law of tithing, first by paying tithing ourselves. Just as sure as we live, if we do not honor the law of tithing, we will never possess the land of Jackson County, except it be by the shedding of blood. But it will not be by the shedding of blood, because you will listen to my voice and the voice of my brethren. We are the sons of prophets, the sons of God. The Lord will not send hornets to drive the people out of Jackson County, as he promised to drive the people out of the land of promise before the children of Israel. But he will send cyclones and earthquakes and pestilences." So here, we don't have that caveat. We're going to pay tithing, but if we don't pay tithing, then we'll have to reclaim it by shedding of blood. We'll go back there and we'll drive them out by the sword, by gun. We are going to be there, though, within 10, 15, or 20 years. We're going to be back in Jackson County.
Absolutely. One way or the other. If we pay tithing, then the Lord will scatter those people, those darn settlers, those Gentiles out of Jackson County to make room for us to return within the 20 years. And if we don't pay tithing, then we're going to have to go and fight for it and shed blood. But either way, we're going to be back there within 20 years. And if that prophecy is not true, says Lorenzo Snow, I am as sure of this prophecy as I am that God lives.
Ooh, right. You have multiple leaders on multiple occasions speaking to the same sort of events coming to pass. They don't. Man, it's sort of hard to find a loophole, isn't it? It's sort of hard to do a sleight of hand and get out some smoke and mirrors and make all this disappear. It looks quite apparent that these prophecies, which at least the last few are sort of connected to each other, they fell on their face boldly.
So Joseph Smith was asked, when is a prophet really a prophet? And he says, only when he is acting as such. So when you are acting in the capacity of a prophet, then what you say is the word of God. Here we have each of these. We have Joseph Smith declaring in that newspaper letter that he is speaking in the name of God, and all fear of whatever could happen to him if he's misleading you, that this is all going to happen within your lifetime. We have Wilford Woodruff speaking in conference as a prophet, and we have the prophets coming in and saying this is true, this is a true revelation. We have Lorenzo Snow speaking in general conference and in a solemn assembly in the Salt Lake Temple as the prophet. And if they're not acting as prophets in these positions when they're making these prophecies, when are they ever going to be speaking as prophets?
Never. Absolutely never. And when is a prophet acting as a prophet any more than when he, and in the LDS Church, I'm using that word advisedly, I'll say or she, is prophesying of things to come. That's when you're acting as a prophet, when you're prophesying. So this is remarkable to me. I think this is this your last example that you have, Masterpiece?
Yes, it is.
By the way, Bill, could you put up that last super chat that you had up there for a second? Because I want Masterpiece to respond to this. You won't get the money. We're going to keep the money. But this is something nice that the Big G said about you. He says, I just want to thank Masterpiece for gracing us with his presence this evening. Masterpiece freaking rocks. Your thoughts about that, Masterpiece?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is something that it means a lot to me. This collection of prophecies have really grated on my nerves, and it's so obvious that these men do not have the powers that they think they have, and these are not well known. So I'm grateful that RFM and Bill Reel gave me this platform to share these and make these well known within the zeitgeist of the XMO world, because these need to be known, and the Mormon Church needs to be called account for these prophecies. They can't just hide behind Fair and Parley Pratt's book, just kind of burying these prophecies. We need to hold them to the fire and say, hey, you guys claim these special powers. These show that you do not have them. Buzz off or whatever.
And if they're going to make the allowance, like, look, hey, these guys are prophets. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they get it wrong. Well, hell, I can sit down and mark down 50 things I think will happen. I've done it before with the President Nelson Take Your Vitamins. We did an episode of Mormon Discussion where me and Chris Bloxham got together and said, what do we think the church will do in the next 20 years? And just mark down a bunch of things. And like a third of them have already come to pass. Like it's already happened. So I'm as much of a prophet as these men are. If you're allowing them to, like, all right, well, they get 3 out of 10 right. That's not bad, you know. But any of us can do that if we, sit down and just use common sense and say, what do we think will happen in the future?
Yeah, if Mormonism were true, all of these things would have come to pass already. And the fact that they have not come to pass already indicates strongly that Mormonism is not true. It is not led by people who have any special gifts or connection with God or any ability to relate the future as God tells them the future will be. There was a story that went out not that long ago, Bill, about the general authorities being advised not to keep journals. You remember that?
Yeah, I think Dieter Uchtdorf was the first one we were told that was asked not to keep a journal anymore. Yes.
Well, somewhere around the turn of the century, not this one, but the last one, somewhere around 1900, I think a similar edict went out that GAs were not supposed to be prophesying anymore because these prophecies dry up right around this time period, 1899, 1900. They stopped doing the prophecy gig. And I think the reason why is fairly obvious, because they have a horrible track record at predicting the future. So they stopped doing that. They changed the definition of a prophet. And this is what I grew up with. When I say grew up, I joined when I was 18, grew up in the church, right? And I was told that a prophet is specifically not someone who predicts the future. A prophet is not a foreteller. A prophet is a forth teller. F-O-R-T-H. The prophet speaks for God, which is much more important to learn what God requires of us to return to his presence to live together with our families forever. Much more important, that part, than it is for a person to predict the future. Am I the only one who's heard that?
No, you're right. And then to sort of add to it, Gene Judson, Latter Daily Digest, sorry, is also pointing out something which is true, which is they've asked patriarchs to stop making extreme promises too. I mean, that's a whole nother set of things where Mormon leadership established in theology that there's these set of men who give blessings to people in the stakes of Zion, and their blessings are, they're serving as sort of a prophetic mantle. They're putting for the individual, putting hands on their head and saying what their future will hold. My father-in-law, in his patriarchal blessing, it says that he'll twinkle rather than have a natural death. My ex-brother-in-law, he was told that he would help build the temples in Missouri, the temple in Missouri. Not only are they not building a temple in Missouri, I mean, he's 400 pounds and not going to build a temple anyway. It's just not going to happen. But patriarchs are told not to do this stuff anymore as well. So it isn't just prophets in the church. It's other people who serve prophetic roles. They're told not to do these things because, as you point out, RFM, these things are not coming to pass. They're failing left and right.
And the patriarchal handbook specifically says not to tell people they'll live to see the Savior come again.
Yeah, don't say that anymore, because we've been saying it for hundreds of years, almost 200 years now, and it's been wrong every single time we've said it, as time has demonstrated.
Yeah, it'll continue to be wrong.
If you guys are interested, I have a huge collection of atrociously wrong and bad patriarchal blessings. I mentioned a couple of them for the Joseph Smith, 1833, but I've got a nice collection of really wild and crazy patriarchal blessings from Joseph Smith Sr. and to people in Utah era, 1800s Utah era. They're really fantastic. If you guys are interested in another series like this, I can dig up my collection of patriarchal blessings that are just hilarious.
That sounds fascinating as well. I want to once again revisit, and just for a second, the concept, because I think there's legs to this concept, that what we see in Mormonism happening here is very much similar to what occurred 2,000 years ago with the Christian church. It starts out for the first 70 years or so, very charismatic, very prophetic, very urgent, very much Jesus is coming. And then they realize that stops, it keeps not being fulfilled. And they start looking like they don't know what they're talking about, which means they start looking like they don't really have the gift of prophecy, which means they start looking like a fake church. So then they stop doing it, and there's a cessation of the charismatic gifts. And then we have the great apostasy, is what we called it when I joined the church back in 1978, among the Christian faith. And they lost the gifts of the Spirit. They had the form of godliness, but they denied the power thereof. To the extent that that is true, okay, and I think objectively, we can say there's a lot of truth to it, that they claim to have those gifts, and then they stop claiming to have those gifts, okay? That way we bypass the subjective part of whether they actually had the gifts in the first place. I think we can say objectively that happens. But what is happening now in the LDS Church, and has been happening for the last 100 years with the cessation of the prophecy and really with the cessation of the charismatic gifts, is the same thing that happened by and large with the Christian church. And it is a condemnation of the LDS Church by the same measuring rod that they used to condemn the original Christian church of falling into apostasy. If the original Christian church fell into apostasy because of this, then the LDS Church is in apostasy now, and has been for 100 years because of this. I'm going to say period, and then I'll say, and this may account, Bill, for why it is that the LDS Church is now changing the definition of the great apostasy.
Yeah, and that's quite clear. We covered that in an episode where we talked about the book Ancient Christians. We played some quotes from Thomas Waymont in that episode as well. And these are things that, again, RFM, I grew up in the Mormonism of the 90s. You grew up in the Mormonism of the 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both of us grew up in the great apostasy being heavily emphasized. And what the characteristics of that were, James Talmage, The Great Apostasy, the book lays those out. There were lots of other books. There were things in the correlated curriculum. And the church clearly gets it. It understands at this point that it is not what it originally claimed it was, and it is now shaping all of its curriculum and the way it frames these ideas so as to leave it some sort of space to exist without being an absolute contradiction.
All right. Very good. Well put. So now, should we open up our phone lines?
Yep. Let me put the banner up. Folks can call in. It's 662-667-6667. The phone lines are open, so you can get into those immediately. We normally take 3 phone calls, folks. We appreciate very much those who are watching live. If you'd like to participate, looks like one call is beginning to come in. 662-667-6667. Or if you've got the letters there below the numbers, you can type in 662 Mormons and join the show.
Fantastic.
So,
If you got a question that you want to make or pose to Masterpiece or a comment, please call in. Or if you have any favorite unfulfilled prophecies by church leaders that you would like to share. One of the things I liked about the show tonight that you put together, Masterpiece, with these examples is that these are not examples that we commonly hear under this category.
Oh, and I should add, I mean, I started working on an episode a month or 2 ago where I was going to discuss sort of like the top 5 failed prophecies of Joseph Smith. And they're the ones that we always sort of throw out. And I found the rebuttal to those by the apologists to actually hold some water. And I found that the argument wasn't going to be very strong. So hence there was no episode there to do. And so I was quite tickled when Masterpiece comes along and goes, hey, I won't be using those ones. I'll be using a bunch of others that aren't in the correlated sources. And they're sort of things you have to dig a little bit for. And I'm quite impressed with the ones that you found tonight, Masterpiece. So,
and when Bill and I were talking about this whole phenomenon earlier today, in preparation for tonight's show, the subject came up. Why is God giving these predictions of future events to his prophets in the first place? Now you could say, well, there's an aspect of warning, but it really doesn't seem to be much of warning. Okay. It's going to happen regardless of whether you know about it. And people are not going to be leaving New York to escape the destruction. They're just going to be caught up in it. The primary purpose, I think, from the LDS perspective, is that God is giving these predictions to his prophets so that when those predictions happen, everybody will have to acknowledge that the prophets in the LDS Church are true prophets of God, and they really are inspired of God because their prophecies came to pass. If we can agree to that much, okay, or even if that's a large part of why these prophecies are given, the question has to arise, why is God arranging things in such a way as to take what should be a sign that Joseph Smith or Lorenzo Snow or Wilford Woodruff or Brigham Young, why is God taking these people who are his true prophets from the Mormon point of view and giving them prophecies that don't come to pass? Why is it that he's making it look like they're false prophets? If we have to wait till the millennium, they're looking like false prophets. If it's something that's always going to happen sometime down the road and in the future, it's not helping them look like true prophets. If it actually came to pass, that would be remarkable. And I think I would certainly be at the head of the line saying, wow, that is impressive. That's a remarkable prophecy. It was given in advance, and it actually happened the way it was prophesied. I would be right there with amazement on my lips. And yet, time and time again, God seems to be setting things up in a way that shows that his prophets are not true prophets. I'm sorry, Bill, what we're saying?
No. I'm sorry. I thought you were getting ready to end there, and I was going to jump in right after that. Sorry, my dog's looking at my face. So,
can we see your dog now? Everybody wants to see your dog.
Here he is.
Oh,
I have never seen your dog before. What's your dog's name?
Teddy.
Teddy, how you doing, Teddy? Teddy's a star.
Yeah. So, it's even worse than that. I've said that. This is the third time I've said that during this episode. It's worse than that. It's almost like God is trying to show Mormons that their prophets are false prophets. That's how bad it is. That's how much of this stuff doesn't add up. It's like you would think a blind squirrel would even find an acorn once in a while, and these guys don't. They're acornless.
God is trying to show, and apparently it's falling largely on deaf ears because the Mormons don't care about this. Masterpiece is one who did care about it. But like you said, you are one in a million. The other faithful members of the church that you discuss this with find an endless variety of ways to dismiss these and not have it impact their testimony of the presidents and prophets in the church.
Yeah. And every once in a while, I think of what it would be like, what the church would be like if they were actually led by prophets that had the powers that they claim to have. And it would be amazing if they were able to warn us of things coming up. They were able to say, hey, be prepared for this because this is going to happen. And this,
you mean like a worldwide pandemic?
Something like that. Or hey, if they were preparing us for when we should be accepting of people of different races and accepting them as our equals. Say, hey, I know you guys are all racist right now, but start loving these people. Start being ready for when we can accept them all as equals. But instead, they're telling us black people are an inferior race, or they're cursed by Cain, or all these horrible things. They're codifying their biases and bigotry into the religion and making it so much harder for the members to accept what the rest of the world already accepts and has passed us by, and we're still like, oh shoot, well God said. Yeah. If they were actually able to do these things, it would be amazing.
You know why Bill and I were smiling there?
Why?
It's codified.
Codified.
Oh, yes.
It's totally codified. It was the leaders of the church who were teaching the racism to the members of the church. And then the church switches and now lifts the priesthood ban. And now the story is that it was the members who were racist. And that's why it took so long for the ban to be lifted. And you members, you need to stop being so racist.
If only it wasn't the prophets and apostles telling us to be so racist and giving us justification for it.
Yeah. Or is there anybody calling, Bill?
Yep. So we've got one phone call. By the way, lots of people have said that this has been a great episode. So thank you very much, Masterpiece, for presenting this. What's the name, caller? Oh, let me put you. Give me 1 second. Let's try that again. What's the name? We're running into that issue again. I'm going to try something.
Okay, Bill's going to try something. It's going to be technological.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, it's going to be behind the scenes, and it's going to take me a moment, but I'm going to do what's called initiating a new outbound call.
Wow. This is like Apollo 13 getting into trouble. You're just going to fix it up with some duct tape and socks.
Something like that. I will try to have the call-in studio recall me again and see if... Here we go. Looks like it's happening right now. Nope. Ah, this is frustrating. It seems like we run into this a lot more often now where things don't quite work right. And I don't get it. Sometimes it's my mistake. I'll have the phone line muted or something. You know, we've run into this muting mistake once in a while here on the show. People haven't noticed, but
it's obviously Satan trying to keep the message from getting out.
That's got to be it, huh?
Or from a different perspective, it's God trying to keep this message from getting out.
Oh, yeah.
It all depends upon your point of view.
All right. I'm going to try this one more time. So let's see if we can call back.
Okay. I remember when I was on my mission and we would be teaching a discussion in Japanese, of course, and the phone would ring. And of course, phones ring all the time, you know. It's just sort of a thing that phones do. But if it happened during a discussion, then the understanding among the missionaries was that it was Satan on the line. He's just trying to disrupt stuff. That's Satan. He doesn't want the gospel being teach.
Yeah, could you imagine how much worse it would be if we were out on the waters, you know?
Yes, it would.
There's that great article recently. I can't remember who published it, but it was Satan going, instead of being this great destroyer of worlds and building up armies and navies, he's now just making people sad and depressed and things like that. So he's gone from this great powerful thing to just the mundane Satan, the small Satan instead of the big Satan.
Kobe, are you there?
Colby, is that Colby Reddish?
It might be, but it's definitely not coming through the roadcaster. Kobe, I'm gonna do this the old-fashioned way and put the phone up next to the mic. But are you there, my friend?
Colby has a great comment.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm here, and I'll be brief. So we don't have to go back and forth.
Go ahead, my friend.
Okay, you guys talking about the failed prophecies, it's very interesting. Thanks to Masterpiece for putting this together. But I was struck by something as you guys were talking about the reason they no longer tell prophets and apostles to keep journals is so that they may be, not creating this paper trail that Masterpiece has discovered with these past prophets. And one of the things I was thinking is, like, how ridiculous is it that the church for decades, still on their website, like I just pulled it up, teaches its members to keep journals. Spencer W. Kimball said it's like a duty of every member to do that. And yet the top leaders operate under a completely different set of rules, like to keep the church unfalsifiable. Like, that's literally Orwellian. Like, that's some animals are equal, or all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others level logic. Like, that's so absurd. I just had to call in and point that out.
Great. We'll hang up with you and we'll comment on that. Okay. Thanks, Kobe.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad. No, he's absolutely right. And I've got to tell you, when I joined the church in 1978, we heard, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hearing somebody telling you needed to keep a journal, a daily journal. It was all over the place. And I remember because it was one of the many things I felt bad for not doing, but I was supposed to doing that and keeping a garden and the whole food storage bit and all of this stuff that we were supposed to do as part of our duty as a Latter-day Saint in following the prophet. Now, I could not tell you when the last time I heard in general conference about anybody teaching that members need to keep journals. It's probably up there on the website, like Colby said. I just don't hear it actively taught, and I can't remember. Do you remember last time you heard that, Masterpiece or Bill?
It's kind of gone away with food storage. You don't hear about that either.
Right, until after COVID happened, and then what was it? It was Elder Bednar got up and chastened everybody for not remembering what the prophets had taught about food storage 30 years before.
Yeah, you renew things when you need it, but otherwise you want it gone. Okay, the next caller here I think might be Galen. Oh, I might have
Gayla.
Gayla, how are you doing?
I'm great. I love this, but I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I was kind of gone by the 70s. But my father was a Mormon bishop, and I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so it wasn't Utah. It was very different. But so he believed all of this stuff. My father was so strict and crazy from being a Lehigh Mormon. But I was going to also say, please do the patriarchal blessings. I have one somewhere, and I remember I got it fairly young, and my mother, it says something about your Savior will circle you in his arms. And I never thought shit about it, except my mom would get all, cuckoo over it. And so, of course, the second coming was always right around the corner. And they have talked about food storage again, because my husband is still in. Actually, he's in the state presidency. And he came home one day and he's like, we need to get some food storage. So they have been piping on that one lately, too.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Thank you, Gayla. Yeah, absolutely. Now they're all over food storage again. Now that COVID kind of snuck up on him and hit him upside the head with a 2x4 and said, hey, you haven't been talking about this in 20 to 30 years. Ha, ha, ha.
At least toilet paper storage.
Yes, the toilet paper storage. You're right. Exactly. But this is what made Mormonism so exciting in the early years of Mormonism and the early years of my membership in the church. It's vital. It's fun. It's exciting. It's happening. But then when you take the historic perspective and you start living through it and start looking at things, it's exciting because it's promising things are just about to happen that never happen.
Just to say, go off in the weeds for a moment, food storage is one of these weird things where there are some people who benefit from it. If you're in a situation, COVID would be a great example. If the grocery stores are lacking things on the shelves, having food storage might be extremely useful. But for almost everyone in the church who followed prophetic counsel and got food storage put the wheat and the flour and all those things down in their cellar or their basement or, in a closet shelf. Almost all of those folks ended up losing out more than if they had just taken the money spent on food storage and put it into a savings account or got a CD or whatever else some sort of safe investment. And, putting it in like a savings account at a bank, even with almost no interest collected. And then you run into an emergency, and 98% of the emergencies you would have run into, that cash would have been more useful than the barrels of wheat and flour and sugar in your basement. And the cash doesn't go bad, whereas the food eventually spoils. And I know so many members of the church who ended up just throwing their food storage out after 10 years because in their mind, they're like, I'm not going to eat 10-year-old stuff here. And
or something else is eating it.
Yeah.
Like the little varmints and the bugs, right?
Yeah. So if the leaders of the church had said, whatever the equivalent of the food storage is, $2,000, whatever it was, if they would have said, take $2,000, put it into a special savings account that you'll just never touch and put $10 a week into it and gave that as prophetic counsel, those people would have been much better prepared for emergencies almost every time.
Can I mention along those lines that if we had prophets at the head of this church and a God who communicated with them, who actually gave a crap about the members and their welfare, okay, just let us know when it's going to happen. Okay, in the Old Testament in Genesis, we've got Joseph, and he says we're going to have 7 years of plenty, and then we're going to have 7 years of famine. So we need to take care and prepare during these 7 years of plenty for the 7 years of famine that will follow. And sure enough, in the Old Testament, that's exactly how it happened. Why can't we get 7 years or whatever notice that something bad's going to happen? We're going to have a time of famine when we're going to need this food storage. No, we never get that. It's just something that you have to do for a future emergency, otherwise unspecified. Now, that's bad enough. The thing that makes the food storage even worse is that finally, after decades of this crap and nothing ever materializes where the membership generally need food storage, they stop talking about it. Just like they stopped talking about the journals. They stop encouraging it. 10 years goes by, 20 years goes by, food storage is a thing of the past, and then COVID hits. And now everybody's caught flat-footed. And not only, the church can't even take credit for saying, we told you to get food storage, because they stopped saying it 20 years before.
Right.
After decades of not needing it, but they're teaching it. So they stopped teaching it. Now COVID hits. People could have used that with some advance notice. The prophets are caught flat-footed once again. But Elder Bednar, as we said, came forward after COVID hit and said, hey, 20, 30 years ago, we were talking about food storage, and you should have been listening to the prophets like me and my wife, Susan, have. And there was our food storage the other day. I think that's how the talk went. I'm sorry, Bill.
No, you're good. There was this one moment, too, where President Hinckley said, hey, I'm not prophesying, but, there might be some hard moments up ahead. And I remember John Lynch from Fair Mormon said, oh, that's one of those moments where I know he didn't say it was a prophecy, but it obviously turned out to be pretty prophetic. And so I consider that a prophecy. And now looking back, knowing how much money those guys were putting into the stock market, knowing that they were creating dummy companies, how much money being invested was important to them, you can bet your ass that the top leaders of the church were being told before, I don't know if that was the 2008 housing crisis that came after that, on when President Hinckley died. I know he took over in 95.
Like that, but it was many, many years before the event happened that Scott Gordon is claiming it was a prophecy of, right?
Yeah, but let's say it's 3 years before, I can imagine that the church's investment firm, Ensign Peak, is going to the church and saying, hey, just FYI, some of the indicators are starting to show that there's going to be rough times ahead. Those guys would know it before all of the rest of us. So when President Hinckley says this isn't a prophecy, but it wouldn't hurt to have a rainy day fund, it would make more sense that he's actually getting advice from Ensign Peak about the hard times that are possibly coming, rather than us putting him up on a pedestal and saying that he's being prophetic.
The economies go through cycles. There are ups, there are downs, there are booms, there are busts.
And there are indicators of those.
Yes, but anybody, if I say right now the economy is going to boom, I will be correct, given enough time. If I say the economy will bust, which may be closer than any of us would be happy about.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be proven true.
There's
And
turmoil going to be turmoil in the Middle East.
Wars, absolutely. Wars. Iran is going to attack Israel. If that happens, am I a true prophet? It appears that in the Mormon Church, according to was it the fair Mormon guy that you were quoting there, Bill?
John Lynch.
John Lynch. Apparently, prophets are never prophesying so much as when they say they're not prophesying.
Amen.
So now the critic in me, or the skeptic in me, will look at the church's call for food storage as a market they have all these farms, they're gathering all this food, and they have nowhere to put it. So they have a market, so they can just sell it to the members, say, hey, buy all of our food storage and you can have this, buy all of our materials, our buckets from us, and we'll make money and you can have your food storage. So I can see that as being a skeptic in me, just the reason why they might have told people to do that. And when they had enough money other ways, they didn't need to, or maybe they have other venues to sell their stuff. They didn't need us to buy it from them anymore.
Well, I would think that was being overly skeptical too. By the way, good point. I would think that would be overly even cynical, right? About the church's profit motive of producing things that they need to offload, and who are they going to offload it to other than the members of the church, that they can put some kind of religious imperative on buying what it is the church is selling. I would think that would be very cynical, except I went through that myself when I bought 100 copies of the Book of Mormon back in the 1980s so I could put my testimony in them and hand them out to friends, right? And only much decades later do I find out that the church was actually trying to offload all this surplus copies of the Book of Mormon to make room for new editions that they were bringing in.
They manipulated you into buying their overstock.
Yeah. Twice, actually.
Yeah.
Because I was very faithful, and I ended up buying 200 copies of the Book of Mormon. Not nice. Masterpiece. You're never coming back on this show. No, I was totally taken. I was totally taken. He put an L up on his head for those of you who are not watching the show. I think he was implying that I was a loser. Lahoo, the loser.
The church's prophecies sort of remind me of like The Secret. If you guys remember this whole thing that, it's still around, but it was much stronger a couple of decades ago, where they'd put out like these video series and said, like, if you just think positive thoughts, good things will happen. And that's how you sort of tether yourself to this positive energy and make good things happen in your life. And if you throw enough shit against the wall, something eventually sticks. That's the whole point. And Mormonism sort of works that way. Once in a while, Section 87 we were talking about today, Civil War started in South Carolina. You and I talked about, you had pointed out that there were numerous sources from the day that everyone would have been aware of, including Joseph Smith and the church, that South Carolina was the hotbed that it was almost certainly going to break out in. But he sort of gets a bullseye, even if you get, grant these extra sources. And if you throw enough stuff against the wall, something will stick.
Absolutely. And the Texas sharpshooter fallacy says you throw stuff out there, then you draw circles around the ones that you like, and you ignore the rest.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, we've got one more call. This, I believe, is it says Lark, but what's the name, caller?
Lark.
All right, Lark, you're on Mormonism Live.
I just had a quick comment. The reason that Satan only does little miracles is because, or little depressions, is because God only does little miracles. Like you pray and find your keys, so they have to match.
Yes,
that's all. That's all.
Satan can't have more power than God.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so he got demoted. Oh, and my dad also got twinkled or whatever, but he's definitely dead.
Yeah, the twinkling didn't happen.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry
no.
about that, Mark.
He died, and his last words were, "Get me out of this den of iniquity." So,
where did he die?
In my living room. He was dying of cancer on hospice.
I'm sorry. I was wondering if it was some place that he considered to be a den of iniquity.
Oh no, it was my house.
But probably he was
really
referring
your
to
house?
I'm the den of iniquity.
He was probably referring to his cancerous body and not your living room, though, correct?
No, I think she's saying it was her house.
No, he was referring to my sisters and I.
Oh, dang.
My
Well-
sister's a lesbian, and my other sister is a nurse who tried to give him weed for his pain.
Holy crap. Well, I guess God did answer his prayer.
Got him out.
Yeah, sure did.
Well,
Elvis
thank
has
you,
left the
Lark.
building.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Lark, thank you so much for calling. Wow. Can you imagine? Oh, that's sad. That's sad, but definitely not twinkled.
That's the end of our phone
By the
call.
way, for all those people who are not members of the church who watch the show, because I know you're out there, right? When we say twinkled, what that
We don't mean
you're wondering
tinkled.
what the
Yeah.
hell are they talking about getting twinkled? That means that we have a belief, which is taken, I think it's from the New Testament, but we as Mormons use that, talking about that when Jesus, that when Jesus comes again, okay, we're not going to die a natural death, but instead we will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. I think the expression is in the King James Version. And so therefore, since we'll be changed, we'll be translated from this body, the mortal body, into an immortal body instantaneously upon Jesus showing. That has been called twinkled. We'll be twinkled. We'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye. That's what that's talking about.
Yeah, you'll transition from mortality to immortality without any process of death being visible.
Right. Will be twinkled. So the fact that he passed away, Lark's dad passed away in Lark's living room, would indicate that prophecy in the dad's patriarchal blessing did not actually come to pass.
As with about 1 million other patriarchal blessings that said similar kinds of things and didn't come to pass.
Yeah, the crazy thing about my patriarchal blessing is it talks about me becoming a moderately well-known post-Mormon podcaster.
Yeah, well, mine actually does say I will have influence on my listeners.
Oh, nice.
Really?
It does.
Does it say you'll be a podcaster? Like
No,
mine?
it doesn't. It's not that specific. You have to read between the lines, but it does seem like it is a true patriarchal blessing.
Very good. The really crazy thing is mine was given in 1979 before they even had podcasting.
I know, and that your patriarch was way ahead of that. He could see around corners.
So explain that, Makepeace. Peacemaker, excuse me. Masterpiece.
What really ticks me off on the patriarchal blessings is it's always the person's fault. They weren't righteous enough. They did something wrong, and that's why the patriarchal blessing didn't come true. It's never the patriarch's fault. He never did anything wrong. It's never the church's fault. But if we do the patriarchal blessing one, I've got Wilfred Woodruff's patriarchal blessing, Lorenzo Snow blessing, that gives outlandish prophecies of what they're going to do or grants them powers. And if these guys who are prophets, they cannot have their patriarchal blessings fulfilled, and they're supposed to be so righteous, then what chance do we have of getting our patriarchal blessings fulfilled? So don't feel bad if your patriarchal blessing didn't come true. It's all fake anyway.
Oh, by the way, so that you know, Masterpiece, the big cheese, the one who donated $25 to us that you're not getting a penny of, ask this question. Can you see it? It says, RFM Bill, can you please ask Masterpiece if he has food storage? Do you have food storage?
I have some food in my freezer and pantry, but nothing like a whole year supply or something.
Okay, thank you. So there we go. You give us $25. We'll ask any question you want. So is that it? I think that's it then. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Masterpiece. Thank you so much for all the technical help, Bill. You're amazing and wonderful as always. And we will definitely have you back in the future, though I can't guarantee you how soon in the future. It could be, I don't know, it could be in the next life. It could be in the spirit world that we'll have you back on the show. We promise you. We promise you. We predict in the name of the Lord that you will be back on Mormonism Live to talk about patriarchal blessings. And I'm looking forward to that. I think the audience is too. Thanks everybody for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week, next Wednesday at 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time, same bat channel, for another episode of Mormonism Live. Good night, everybody.